everybody? My name is Julian Leonard, and I'm founder of the Jay Leonard Group, also known as the Jay Leonard Public Speaking and Coaching Group. So far, I've released 15 public speaking tips, and today we've come to another question and answer session. I'm usually answering questions from viewers that takes a deeper dive into some of the topics I've covered so far, or just about public speaking in general. So without any further delay, let's jump right into it. During a recent presentation, my PowerPoint stopped working a few minutes into my talk. It was embarrassing and frustrating because I had a 15-minute talk to give and the PowerPoint was a big part of it. What's the best way to handle a scenario like this? You know, this actually happened to me before on a much smaller scale. I think my presentation was around 7 minutes long and my PowerPoint stopped working in totality. It totally threw me off because at the time I was heavily dependent on my PowerPoint, which means I wasn't practicing the right way. The best way to prepare for the inevitable is to practice out different scenarios. Practice like you would regularly with your slides, and then on the flip side, you should practice the same presentation without your slides. Your talk should be effective without the use of visual aids. You never want to put yourself in a position where you're totally or mostly dependent on your PowerPoint because technology can let you down in the most critical moment. It also makes you look unprepared if you have to turn your back to the audience to read what's on your slide. You can also mimic a situation where maybe you present the first 3 slides in your presentation and then mysteriously your presentation fails. Literally practicing what you don't want to happen in the moment could really prepare you if the worst does happen in the moment. No matter what you do, you must keep your game face on and keep going. Question number 2. I find it hard trying to tell stories that involve the pain of my past. I know that people can be encouraged by them, but it's just hard to get started. Do you have any helpful tips with letting my guard down? I'm perfectly aware that it can be difficult to relive hard times that you've gone through in front of strangers. We all have things that we wouldn't even tell family members. Think about that. It can really be difficult for anyone to expose that side of themselves in front of strangers. The mindset I always have is that someone listening is going through the same thing or something similar, and they can possibly learn from the way I handle the situation. Since I'm not sharing the painful memories randomly, there's always either a lesson or some type of inspiration behind sharing these stories. Remember, you're not talking about random stories that have no point. Each one should have some strategy behind it and a lesson that comes from it. When it comes to storytelling, it's not all squeaky clean, and you'd be surprised at how much of your audience will relate to what you've been through. But on another note, if still you feel that you aren't comfortable with this idea, then don't force it. I'm a big proponent of doing what feels most comfortable on the stage and in the moment. I've seen some speakers who don't share any part of their personal lives or struggles. For the majority, the impact isn't the same, but there are some who still make it work. Maybe you don't have a ton of detail about what you went through. Maybe what you provide is simply surface level. Whatever the case may be, you'll start to see that the problems you have are also the problems that the people in your audience have. They just might not be as brave as you to talk about it. Ultimately, remember, what you're saying could really help someone who is in need, who's in a similar position, and going through rough time. Your words can truly inspire them. Question number 3. It's so hard not to apologize when you make a mistake in the moment. What do you suggest? Look, I'm gonna be real with you. I suggest you come to the reality that very few people will present a flawless presentation, if any. You could have provided more detail in the story. The transition between your first and second point may have been rough. There's no perfect speaker. I always say that, and it's true. You don't want to get in the habit of apologizing over and over again. As a new speaker, you're prone to make a ton of mistakes. And just think, it takes a lot of work for new speakers to get that one shot, their first shot. No one wants to hear apologies over and over again once you do get on the stage. You'd also be surprised just how often the audience doesn't catch a mistake until you point it out to them. It happens all the time. Of course, you should apologize for huge and apparent mistakes, but every little hiccup doesn't need an apology. Trust me. Sometimes you have to deal with your mistakes by diligently working not to repeat them again. Question number 4. Do you suggest asking questions throughout your talk or wait to answer questions at the end? Generally speaking, you would save your question and answer session for the last 10 to 15 minutes. This gives your audience enough time, and really more than enough time, to digest your information and form good questions. Now, one scenario I can think of off top where you could possibly answer questions on the fly is if you're doing IG Live. I've noticed in a lot of different situations where people tend to ask questions as they come. And that's because the audience who's watching the IG Live tends to just ask questions on and on. That's perfectly fine. If you aren't collecting those questions to be asked at the end, then go ahead and ask them as they come. This makes sense. But do your best not to have it interrupt the flow of your interview because that could be distracting for some. Question number 5. What should you do if you're asked a question that you don't have the answer to during your talk? So say this question is related to your talk, but for some reason you don't know what response to give in a moment. Now this can happen due to time limits on the question and answer session, Or it could be that the question is a real heavy question that will require you to think a lot about it. In any event, if you find yourself in a situation, you can always say that you need more time to think on it, and you provide them with a direct answer. Now, make sure you follow up. You need to collect the contact information and then follow up and answer that question. Another way to approach it is to ask clarifying questions. This is simply you making sure you understand what exactly is being asked. You can ask for specific examples in order to get a better picture, and you can also repeat the question while also adding how you interpreted it in order to make sure you get it right. I've never really been asked a question that I couldn't answer because I'm always asking clarifying questions. I'm always getting more details throughout the questions I ask. So if you ask the question that you don't understand the first time around, try asking the question back. Do it until it becomes clear about what's being asked. If you found this tip useful, please like it and share it. Comment on it as well and let me know what you think. Until next Monday, my name is Julian Leonard and this tip was brought to you by the J. Leonard Group.